various levels that pertain therein. And essentially, with God's help, what I'm trying to do is to provide some insights and some tips and some ideas of how to traverse these situations, how to navigate these waters. Of course, it goes without saying that when a person has a particular situation that's full of details and has its own set of challenges, they should speak to somebody on an individual basis. And if someone wants to reach out to me, I'll try to help them. Just trying to give some general guidelines that could help a person in this predicament. And in addition, I want to share with you that for those of you that are not in my class during the year, my father, Dr. Yaakov Hanoka, blessed memory, was a Baal Teshuva and came to Lubavitch in 1961. So he had this situation because he would go visit his parents, my grandparents, who were traditional. They didn't really have treif in the house, but he couldn't eat out of the kitchen. So there was a question of how to traverse that, how to navigate that. And as a child, when I'd visit my grandparents, I witnessed how that was handled very seamlessly, very nicely by my mother and grandmother, blessed memory. So I saw that sort of in action, and I'd like to try and share some of these ideas with you. Okay, so the first thing I'd like to say and to make sure is clear is that the relationship we have with our family, whether it's our parents, our siblings, our aunts and uncles, our grandparents, is very precious. And the Torah places a lot of importance on that relationship. We have to respect them. And we also want to make sure that we stay very close to them. The ways of the Torah, the ways are pleasant, and the pleasant ways, and the paths are paths of peace. So even when we face situations that are challenging, we should keep in mind that we want to try to do things as smoothly as possible. Sometimes we need to ask somebody outside the situation for how to approach something, but that should be the goal. Another thing I want to emphasize is that whatever we could do within the bounds of what's going on in this particular kitchen that's not kosher, for example, we can have a cold drink from a clean cup. Yes, we'll let have here. They have orange juice in the refrigerator that's reliably certified kosher, and the cup is clean, even if it's a non-kosher cup. But if it's cold and you're just having it, for a couple of minutes, it's not sitting in the cup for 24 hours, it's not sharp, one's allowed to have that drink, or you can have it from a disposable cup. So there are a lot of things that can be done and should be done in a responsible manner so we can participate and be part of the experience, but done in a proper way. Okay, so that's just a general idea. Now, another thing I want to emphasize is that it's very important that there should be open communication between in this case, it's the child and the parents or the relatives. They just let them know, look, and if let's say it's a daughter coming home, she'll say to her mom, I'm religious, as you know, and therefore I keep kosher, and this is what I need, but I'm not going to tell you and dad what to do in any way, but here's what I would need to be able to have hot food at home. Can we make accommodations? Can we talk about some of the options? If you have a conversation and let her know what you need, it's different than coming to say, hey, I learned this in school or in yeshiva and machol, and you're not doing X, Y, and Z. We're not their teachers, so to speak. We're not their mentors. They have to come to it on their own, and very often they do come to it on their own when they see the beauty of their children, but only when it's something that's done organically on their own. So really, it's about just communicating that and saying, I really want to come home. I'd love, or you can say to mom, I'm going to be able to double wrap the food, put it into a treif oven, double wrapped, and keep it double wrapped the whole time. It's kosher food, and then you can have your meal. And you can sit at the table. You're not going to share food with them, but you can sit together at the same table and not mix the food. So there are ways to do that. It could be a little bit awkward, but once we navigate it, then things get into a flow. In addition, if you live in a place that has kosher restaurants, so then the easiest answer could be just to do takeout, get kosher takeout, and everyone's going to eat kosher. Even those that don't keep kosher have no problem keeping kosher or eating kosher per se. That's another option, which if possible, could be exercised. Now, in the kitchen itself, to go ahead and kosherize various utensils, there are some utensils in the kitchen that are more easily kosherizable and some are more challenging to kosherize. So if you're visiting home, let's say just for Thanksgiving weekend, for example, you're going to be home just for 4 days, right? You're going to be home from Thursday to Monday. So you're not going to do a full-blown kosherization of the kitchen. It's going to be a little too disruptive. So then we could talk about some options such as double wrapping the food. You can kosherize a burner as long as it's not a flat stove top. I'm talking about either a regular gas burner or an electric burner. Those are very easy to kosherize. You turn them on for about 20 minutes. Better if a pot's under it so the fire would spread, and then it kosherizes the burner. The burner's clean, it's kosher. You could use that burner. You have your own kosher pot, you can cook food, you got your own utensils. And then when it comes to washing the pot and the utensils, I'll take the question in a couple of moments. Washing the pot and the utensils, you'll wash that by hand, holding the pot and the utensils in your hand, so you're not going to have it sitting in the sink that's not kosher. Therefore, it won't be compromised that way. So, in summation, we can kosherize a burner very easily. To kosherize a sink is not so simple. It's possible, but it's not something so practical to do in that kind of a scenario I just gave if you're only home for a few days. So I'd recommend washing the utensils while holding them in your hand, which is perfectly fine. You can use dish soap. Dish soap does not even need certification. Don't use a non-kosher sponge. That's a no-no. If you need to take a fresh piece of steel wool, you need to have something that's abrasive to be able to get off any residue. And those are some of the basics. They make 9x13 pans for the Jewish people. So you get those pans, and you can put food in there, and then you can wrap it again with foil if you want. Then you have a double wrap environment. You can put anything and everything kosher inside a tray for oven as long as it's closed the whole time. Be mindful that when warming something up, double wrapped, it takes longer for it to heat up, and you cannot open it up in the middle of the oven to check whether it's warm, because that would cause a forbidden absorption. So leave it in there for another hour. It's probably not going to burn because it takes longer for the heat to penetrate, but it does work. I do this when I go on vacation. When I go, if I rent an Airbnb and I'm only going to be there for a couple of nights, and I'm not going to self-clean the oven because, first of all, it often breaks the igniter. I don't want to have any liability. I just bring a 9x13 pan. I bring a larger pan to go over that, and I have food that I'm going to warm up, and I just double wrap and leave it in there for a very long time. It's very simple.
You're saying that if you double wrap things and put it in the oven, you can't open it then and see if it's warm?
So you cannot open it inside the oven because you're going to have an absorption issue. You can open it outside. You take it off, take it out of the oven, and put it on the counter. Let's say you have some foil on the counter. You also have to put a barrier on the counter because the counter is not kosher, and then you can check it that way. So I'll tell you a story. I was traveling in Hartford, Connecticut. I remember when this happened. It was summer travel. I traveled a lot in the summer, and I had a toaster oven, and my toaster oven died on my trip, and that's my cooking device. It was an old toaster. I wasn't so sad, but I just wanted to have a warm supper. But thank God I know the halacha, so I went and I brought had some like veggie burgers of sorts. And I brought them downstairs to the cafeteria of the hotel, to the front desk. And I said, "Can I warm this up in your oven?" I said, "But I keep kosher. I have to watch it being warmed the entire time." I said, "Okay, you can do that." And they gave me some foil. I double wrapped it. It was put into a tray for oven. They didn't let me actually stay inside the kitchen. I stood by the door, but I watched it. And it stayed in the oven for like 45 minutes. Didn't get open. I was standing there learning Rambam, watching. I was a shomer. And then they brought it to me and I had hot food. So it's a very, very effective way and a very efficient way to have hot food in a place where you don't have a kosher kitchen, kosher oven. Yes.
So going back to the stove, before you pop it, doesn't it have to be Ben Yomo or no?
So a stove, the laws about Ben Yomo, which refer to something that was not used within the last 24 hours, that was used. When it comes to kosherizing something with actual fire, which was what we're doing when it comes to the stovetop, there's no issue of Ben Yomo, because what happens is when we kosherize with fire, we actually burn any substance in its place. We're not removing substance and taking it out. If it's coming to kosherize with water, when we remove substance to take it out, then we must make sure it was not used within the last 24 hours, because otherwise we're going to reabsorb a forbidden absorption. But when we're actually creating an effect where we're burning something in its place, it doesn't exist anymore, therefore it's not required to be not used 24 hours prior. Excellent question. Thank you. Yes.
Can I know
Electric stovetop could be kosherized, electric or gas. When it comes to a flat stovetop, it's a little bit more complex. I'm going to talk about that now, but I want to give a public statement, so to speak. If and when you're going to be designing your kitchen, don't get a flat stovetop, because from a kosher perspective, it's more complex. It creates unnecessary issues. If you already have one, we'll deal with it, but let's not choose to go that route. So there's really three main choices. Actually, there's four today. We also have the induction burners, but you have there's actually five choices, and I'm going to share the joke. Those of you that are my class know this. When it comes to artwork in the family, God gave it to my wife. I was sleeping, picking up, so I'm not going to bother drawing these things, but I'm going to draw it in my mind. You'll try to imagine with me. You have gas stove, gas ranges. Okay, so you turn the knob and gas, bless you, and a fire comes. And in that itself, you can have a raised stove top, which means the entire range on top is all grates. You might have like 5 grates. You'll have one to burn in the middle. It could be a griddle. That's called a raised stove top. And then you have some that are not raised. You'll have 4 burners. You'll have 2 in the back, 2 over here, and a place of enamel metal in the middle. That could either be electric or gas. All that could be kosherized. The idea is that you want to have, if it's electric coils, you turn on the coils to the highest setting for 20 minutes, it koscherizes itself. It totally envelops the heat, no problem. When it comes to an actual grate, if there's gas under there, you want the fire to spread, so you'll put a pot under it. The fire will spread for 20 minutes and it's going to kosherize itself. It's all good and fine. The area between the burners, if it's not a raised stove top, is challenging to kosherize because it can get spillage, hot food, and therefore, if it's trace, we recommend putting down a trivet. So it'll be like a pot holder, so you're not going to actually have a hot pot sitting on it. Okay. When it comes to a flat stove top, this is where it gets complex. Because a flat stove top, like a glass stove top, which is all one smooth surface. So some of the issues you have is that it's all one piece. So, how can you give it multiple statuses? You're gonna say, oh, this is dairy, this is meat, right? It's like, oh, not so simple to go that route. I'm not going to give a definitive ruling. I'm just going to give you like the overview, so to speak. But there are opinions that say you can kosherize the area where the actual flame is, and you turn it on, where it gets hot right under the glass. And then the area between the flames, what you do with that is you pour boiling water over the flame, and that's going to have that water sizzle in the area between.
Over the flame.
Well, when I say flame, I mean, it's not an open flame, it's heat. You have heat there. If you have a flat stove top, you have, let's say, 4 burners, 2 and 2, right? I have a burner going on here. I'm going to pour boiling water over this burner. It's now going to cascade to the area between to sizzle, to make it sizzle. It's not so simple to do that. And it's also challenging because it's all one piece. And there are some people that say another way to do that would be to create like a little bit of a dome, which where you take some heavy duty foil and you let's raise it up, let's say about 8 inches, and then turn on all the fire so the heat is now going to spread all across. The danger of doing that is that sometimes they crack because they're not meant for such intense heat. So it's a challenging thing, and that's why I said if you're in a situation where you can choose not to get such a device, great. But if you have it and you have no choice, to speak to a Rav will guide you what to do. When it comes to an induction burner, those have additional complications. Those are where basically you're heating through friction, and by virtue of the fact you put a pot down on some element, there's friction that gets created, and then suddenly heat is formed, and then that's where the cooking takes place. So here, there's a couple of points I want to mention. Number one, Bishul Akum gets into play because you cannot. The only way the fire is going to stay on is by the pot being there. Once you take the pot off, it cools down. So no such thing as a Jew turning on the fire and it's staying hot, and a non-Jew taking the pot on and off the fire. Every time you take the pot off the fire, the heat is dissipated. So that's one issue, which is a potential problem. The way in which the certifiers that have this in the restaurants get around this problem is they get a circular disc that they screw into the induction burner so that you're always going to have that contact. And you're going to have that element of friction, which is going to generate the heat. So it will be a constant flow of heat. And then they put the pot on top of that. That does slow down the cooking process, but does give you a continuous heat and avoid the bishalakim issue. And then you also have another halacha, which I wanted to mention, which is an obscure law, but it's important to mention. The law is that when it comes to kosherization, gets to your question, when I'm kosherizing with water, if something gets absorbed through boiling water, I'm allowed to kosherize it with boiling water. But if something gets absorbed through boiling water with fire, classical form of heat of cooking, you have fire and it boils water. I'm not allowed to take something that got boiled through magnetic heat and use that to kosherize something that got absorbed through boiling water. Because boiling water through fire is considered to be a stronger form of heat. And the only way to extract that would be through fire. So it has to be like to like principle. So just keep that in mind as well. So one could not use an induction burner, boil water and kosherize, let's say one's counter, because the counter was absorbed, let's say, through boiling water from fire. And therefore they would not qualify. That's just a side point. A couple other points I want to mention is that when it comes to the counters in the kitchen, so easiest would be just to cover them with like corrugated, like the thick plastic people use on Pesach is wonderful. If you don't have that available, double foil, heavy duty foil is also good. And anytime something is cold on a temporary basis, not sitting in the vessel for 24 hours and not sharp, it's okay to use on a temporary basis. Now, if you're going to be living at home for a long time, we have to make long-term kind of arrangement. So those are some basic points to keep in mind in an environment that's not a kosher environment. Now, I want to stress again that it's very important to try and do a lot of what we could do. So we're allowed to have our fruits and vegetables at home. The Israel special tithing laws. You can have fruits and vegetables. You can have your drinks. You can have some snacks that are kosher, and enjoy all those. And when it comes to hot food, you'll do what we said. And when the family unit is tight and the family is close, things flow. They work well. But it should be approached more as this is what I'm doing now. What can we do to make it work? I really want to be comfortable at home. I want to be here. And then mother's going to say yes, but she wants her daughter to be home. That's what's very important to mention. Now, there's another element to this, which I didn't touch on yet, but it's got to be discussed. In some ways, if one's family doesn't keep kosher at all, the lines are very clearly drawn. This is not a kosher kitchen, and I keep kosher. So we got to figure this out. But what happens when your parents keep kosher, but to a standard that you cannot accept, that doesn't work for you? That's more complicated in a way, because what do you mean? Kosher is kosher. What are we doing here? So it's very hard for somebody who keeps a basic standard of kosher to understand or appreciate sometimes what it means to keep a very, very lofty and a very elevated standard of kosher. And why is what we're doing not good enough for you? Well, let's say one's parents keep kosher and they don't keep Chol of Yisrael, but you do. So this can actually be more challenging because they already are in the arena of kosher. And for them to be able to relate or to respect or to appreciate the fact that their daughter is now keeping an elevated standard, it's harder to convey. So there are no easy answers, but there are some suggestions. I'm gonna call upon a story from the Rebbe. There was a rabbi who I knew, who was at the time he was a rabbi, I believe, in Newark, and he asked the Rebbe, how is he supposed to inspire his congregation? This is in the 50s. About Judaism, and these were people that survived the Holocaust, and they went through all these horrors. And so the Rebbe said, talk to them about their grandparents, great grandparents. The Baba the grandmother used to light the candles. The grandfather was a shaykhid, whatever, ritual slaughter. Everyone has. Go back a few generations, they were all connected. So you tell them, we're not telling you anything new. We're just We're reigniting the fire, the spark. We're lighting the embers. So really, sometimes one's parents can say, like, what do you come up with this new ideas, new age stuff? Don't bother me. But the truth is that, it could be your mother's grandmother or your mother's mother was doing this. So you really just, you're connecting to a tradition, goes back all the way to Matan Torah. And when your mother or father or family members can see that and connect with that, it creates a lot of warmth. And it's not judgmental. Maybe they're not ready for that right now themselves, but you can't argue with the fact that this is how it was done, you're connecting with tradition. So that's one approach that one could use. And some things only get answered with time. I'll tell you another story. There's somebody that I know in a Chabad house whose daughter became very religious. She's not Chabad, she's Hasidic, but he's a Chabad. This fellow is connected with Chabad, but he just couldn't understand the whole culture. He just couldn't get it. His son-in-law was in Kollel and had a bunch of kids, and he was supporting them. And now his son-in-law starting to get a job. Just like the whole thing, it was foreign to him, and he used to talk to me about it a lot. And now it's like 10 years later, thank God, they have like 5 grandchildren, have lots of nachas. And he's really connected with the energy, and he feels it, really gets it. So some things get answered with time. Parents see that their child was chosen the path of Torah, they're going to build a family and have nachas and bring home children, God willing, and a husband. And that's something that speaks, it's a universal language. So patience is, sometimes we have to be patient about it. But as long as there's the respect, there's the open communication, and there's clarity, and then there's also a rabbi. Sometimes a rabbi has to be involved, or you can ask a rabbi to explain something, or you can say, I discussed it with the rabbi, or you can have your mother speak to the rabbi, whatever it is. Usually that will produce a better result in terms of clarity. And at the same time, it's very important to show one's parents the beauty of Torah, the fact that the Torah teaches us to respect our elders. You all know as well as I do that in today's secular society, it's the depravity of respect for elders that exists amongst some cultures. So when the Torah comes along and stresses this, which parent is not going to appreciate that? So we show them the beauty of Torah, and a little bit of light just dispels a lot of darkness. And like I said, be very, very close to the family. Be very close to family. And this only produces positive things. When I was growing up, we used to go to my grandparents' house for Thanksgiving dinner. So sometimes my mother would make the whole food and then bring it. And sometimes we bring our own food. We would have half the table would be our family, the other half would be our grandparents and extended family. And again, they weren't eating treif, but we couldn't eat the food. But we enjoyed it. We shared the drinks. We chatted. There was no awkwardness. It was just we knew what it was and we got it done. And to this very day, I have some relatives who don't keep a kosher home. I'm very close to, and we visit them all the time. And we bring the grill, and we bring the food. We bring the soft drinks or the desserts, whatever's easy, whatever they can get, and we have a great time together. So it's just about being realistic. It's a non-issue. So I think that's really the key, the relationship, and there'll be questions. What can I do? Not do? I'm happy to try and help when those questions come up. But the culture and the relationship is really in your hands, of the relationship between the parents and yourself. It's a very important part, a very important component of it. Any questions? Yeah.
A question about this language. So you have said that it's a hard no that you can't move them. What exactly is the issue? If you're using it with cold water.
So if you're using it with cold water and you did it, it's okay. But it's not considered appropriate to do so because it's a sponge that has treif on it. So we don't bring treif or non-kosher onto a kosher vessel. If it was done cold and washed off right away, no harm was done after the fact. But before the fact, we don't do that.
They have a different message and they like want to be a help in their dishes.
That's okay. Yes, that's okay. You know, down there, yeah. Another thing to mention, it just reminded me, is the idea that when it comes to Bishul Yisrael, food that has to be cooked by a Jew, it's better to be cooked by a religious Jew, although technically in Jewish law, if it's cooked by a Jew or Jewess who's not religious, it's still kosher. So let's say one's mom, who's Jewish but not religious, she wants to cook your rice. She wants to help out. Don't say, Mom, no, I'm the one who's got to do it because I'm religious. She'll say, go, you're gonna sleep in the doghouse tonight. Don't do that. Instead, you just please be discreet about it. Like let her turn on the fire. And when she's upstairs, then you can raise the flame if you want, just to participate, to make it more mahudr, better. But we also have to use a certain amount of discretion. If something is permissible, it's permissible. Now, when you have your own home, God willing, you establish your home, of course, you can do things a little bit different, even better if possible, if you have more choices. But we have to know what's considered to be acceptable on a basic level as well, under those circumstances.
When you're talking about like, water and warmed up by fire or something like that, I mean like the kettles that we put into the wall, that's like.
That's considered fire, but if it's an induction burner just from magnetic heat, that's not considered fire. In Jewish law, electricity is considered fire.
And then also, when we were talking about the double wrapping with the 9x13, I thought you're saying 9x13 can be considered one of the double wraps.
One of the wraps. But you have to wrap it one more time over.
Oh, okay.
You can wrap it with foil on the outside, or you could put a smaller pan within the 9x13 pan. Have the double wrap effect.
But I don't understand, because there's a 9x13, it's just like the bottom pan, and it doesn't.
Right, so we don't want to have the actual kosher pan touching another non-kosher piece of metal in case there's any liquidity. That's why you want to have a double wrap effect. So you can wrap it with foil on the outer side, or you could put the 9x13 pan in a larger pan, whichever you want. But it has to be double wrap.
Do the counters need to be covered if they're only, like, if you're not putting hot things on the pan?
If you're only using them for cold and they're clean, they don't have to be covered. But let's say you're gonna have cold cereal and milk. So they have Cheerios or whatever cereal you like, wheat, Sparks, kosher. And you have all these raw milk, you can eat out of their bowl actually, cold. Although I would say you're better off using disposable, but technically if it's cold and clean, you are allowed to, but use your discretion. I don't like doing that because how do you know it's clean and then why can't you have hot? It gets a little complex. But strictly speaking, if it's cold and clean and you're just having a cold bowl of cereal and it's going to be done soon, it's not sitting in there for 24 hours, it's not sharp, it's acceptable on a temporary basis. Okay. Yeah.
After before that glass, it's starting holding.
Yeah, yeah.
Like, if, would it be permissible for you to use their dishes? Like their glass dishes?
So Ariel is bringing up a very, very important point. The Sardin, there are three opinions with regards to glass. The most lenient opinion holds that glass does not absorb. So you have some Sephardic Jews who are religious. They have one set of dishes for dairy and meat. They use the same set of glass dishes. Separate silverware, because the silverware is metal, it does absorb. That's the most lenient approach to glass. Another approach says that it does absorb and you can kosherize it. And a third opinion is even stricter, says it absorbs and you cannot kosherize it. But Ashkenazim take the approach, the middle ground. We hold it absorbs, you can kosherize it. We try to avoid kosherizing it for passive. But for year on, we do kosherize it. If someone is of Sephardic descent and the family keeps kosher and they have one set of dishes, that's their custom, they should speak to their rabbi, but potentially they could be lenient until they get married and then they'll follow their husband's custom. Because that's an existing custom that's bonafide in Jewish law for that community.
I do have family that are like religious and they have that, and that, like parents who like you mentioned, I think they keep kosher in the right traditional. And if they were to have, well, if it doesn't absorb anything like food, great, that would be missed.
According to the Sardin, we'll hold that way, yes. Doesn't absorb.
You don't believe that standard, and then if we are going towards the topic, and you know, the party house that holds that thing, or you like that?
That's a different story because If you grew up Sephardic and that's your tradition, that's one thing, but if you're gonna go invited to someone's house, it's a more complex problem because it's not really our standard. And then I would say you would try to make other accommodation, like if you eat on disposable, don't use a shared plate like that. Because it's not our custom, we hold it's not allowed. Um, there's actually a song about that, to be a Sephardi on Pesach, if you have rice, can be wonderful, and you have to check the rice, but then, yeah, it comes for the Shalom, the Sephardim, they get up at the crack of dawn saying Salichos the whole month. The Ashkenazim are sleeping until the week before. So we can't pick and choose, the Sephardim have plenty of things from the Mechaber, the codifier of Jewish law, Rabbi Yosef Cairo, who was strict, more strict than the Ashkenazi. It goes both ways, but we can't pick and choose, so we have to be linear about it.
Say slichot on the months, it's fun.
But it is fun.
It's very fun.
It is.
Yeah.
You get up early in the morning, but it's definitely a commitment. Yeah. Yeah.
Like in my father's house, we have like, I guess the gas stove, like the fire chamber. There's 4 burners, like, he only really uses once for like everything he cooks. So like, should I Kosher 2 of them, like one like one and dairy one?
Yeah, you could, but I would just, if it's not a kosher home, just turn it on 15 minutes before using it. As long as it's clean, it's not an issue.
And then like, if it's in a house, like if it's in your own house, you have to designate the burner.
Excellent question. So when it's your own house, according to the strict letter of the law, we studied this a little bit in my class, you don't have to, but the custom is to have separate ones for dairy and meat, not part, but dairy and meat to have separate ones. And if you wanted to use the dairy one for meat, to turn it on for 15 minutes, 20 minutes for us to burn it out. That's the custom. But technically speaking, if it's clean, it's considered kosher because it constantly burns itself out from the strict letter of the law.
How does it work then with like flavoring, flavoring? You don't have to always have something that's been flavored.
That's a good question. I didn't touch on that, so I should touch on that. Thank you for asking. When it comes to utensils that are Jewish owned, that were entitled, that weren't immersed in the mikvah, we're not supposed to use them unless they're throwaway or one-time use. We're not supposed to use them without titling. So that's also something to keep in mind. So if, for example, you're buying a kosher pot and you're going to use it at your family's home, you'll title it, and etc. But if it's non-titled material, try to find a way to title it. It'll be a taiva, it'll be a good act, a good deed for yourself and for your family as a whole.
I don't.
Okay, go ahead.
What about like, if it's a kosher style hood and a knife hasn't been used within 24 hours, you use their knives to like, it's just for like a week or so to chop up like a salad.
If it's clean and you're cutting non-sharp food, meaning with the exception of onions and garlic and radishes, etc. If it's clean, yes, but if it's sharp, no. Even if it's not used in 24 hours, if it's sharp and it's absorbed, it will reabsorb. It's a problem.
Is it okay with someone's house exposure? If you feel that they don't put separate burners?
Yes, yes. As long as they keep all of Yisrael, I'm saying, if you keep all of Yisrael, and they do. If it's a meat meal, it's yes, it's not required in Jewish law, it's a recommendation, but having separate burners. But if someone doesn't do that, it's something that's so acceptable. Yeah.
What if you, offer the gas, the glass, for like, stuff, then like, when you're not using it to be covered, but if you have to, like, a side of it, you burn it.
I don't think you have to cover it.
Like when you're family.
Oh, well, then you have to be kosher with it afterwards. While you mean they're using it while you're using it or after using it?
No, after. Like if they don't use your food. burn it.
Oh, then yeah, I would say to cover it, yes. Make sure that it doesn't get absorbed, yes, that would make sense. But be careful only to use the area directly where the fire is,
Right.
because of the issue of the shared space. Yeah,
Okay.
okay, Ariel, yeah.
There was, it was like 2 years ago, I don't remember, I called the love to ask about how to compromise burners, and he said to put it's on the highest, I have gas stove, so
Yeah.
because if you're on for 5 minutes on the highest setting, you're saying to do 15.
I like 15 minutes because it's very thick metal and takes a little time to heat it up.
But then you just also said that it always stays hot and possible.
It catches itself because every time you're turning it on, but the reason why we say the kosher is like 15 or 20 minutes is in case there's a little spillage there, a little bit of food, just to be on the safe side, we're doing that.
I don't have to clean it before, like,
Look at it, if it looks clean, it's fine. Doesn't need like let's follow it clean, if it looks clean, it's okay. Remember your question? Okay,
Like cholesterol and milk. What would be some issues that would come, what, like, you could have mixed with the meat, meals, like, meat milk is set for, maybe the others the same.
yeah, this is a very important subject to touch on also, because you have people that are religious that don't keep Chol Yisrael. We as Hasidim are very, very strict about Chol Yisrael, very precious in the hallmarks of Hasidim. So we have an interesting scenario now. We can eat in someone's house, who, let's say, not Hasidic. They're religious, and the meat that they use is a proper standard of kosher. But the dairy that they have is not Chol Yisrael, so we wouldn't eat off their dairy equipment, period. We won't eat off their dairy side, but we could eat off their meat dishes, or whether it's a shechita or something, or we eat that as well. So it's a new dynamic that we have because of this situation with Chol Yisrael, not Chol Yisrael. And that's a common thing. So actually, as long as they have, and they're careful to only buy meat with a good kosher standard, we could eat off the meat dishes, the meat side. And I had such a relative also, doesn't live around anymore. Whenever I go eat there, we'd eat off the meat side. The dairy was not fully Yisrael, but they're fully religious. They wouldn't mix the meat in the milk. So we'd either have a fish dinner or even a meat dinner with a shechita that I was comfortable with, but all cooked on the meat side. And that's how it is. So that's an example of where we're being realistic. We have standards. This is what we need, and we're upfront about it, and we move forward and we have a good time together as family. It doesn't get in the way. There's an element of respect. If we don't communicate it, it can lead to a lot of problems. But when you do communicate it effectively, it's very helpful and very useful. Okay, yeah.
The only reason why I'm asking is because, like, I don't necessarily walk into a store. I can be most stores here in the but I don't necessarily walk into a store and think like, oh wait, like no, there's different signs for this.
Well, the thing is that